So here we are, bioreactors full 3 weeks in, and we are just about completely knocked out with our thermophilic cycling. Still see we have new little fungi popping up every day, all these weird little mushrooms that show up in these piles. We're not done with the thermophilic, but we're close. We're right at 100 degrees today. We were at close to 120 yesterday. So we really kind of hit that tipping point. And that's what I said. Usually I get about 3 weeks out of these where they're producing some significant heat, and then it kind of drops off, and you know, it'll be down to 80 degrees probably very, very soon. You still see it's pretty cold out today. Of course, as soon as I said, I don't know if you can see that, there's still some steam wafting out of some of the aeration columns. You can see all the pipes have been removed at this point. One thing I really like to do is leave that center pipe with that sprinkler on there, but I'm rethinking how to do this because it is a better policy that those pipes aren't in there, because that leaves the entire surface area of the air column open. And of course, if you watch my last video, I got a little hack now for adding new holes. And somebody said, isn't that disturbance? It's disturbance, but it's minimal disturbance. We're not turning it by putting an extra hole in, because we do end up, if you look at these, and this is why I'm not the biggest fan of removing the pipes in some ways. You get a lot of, you know, Dr. Johnson says with his, the mycelium completely kind of stabilized the holes, but that's not been my experience, especially, let's go a month ahead from now when everything's cooled off and we've got worms and stuff going on in there. Well, then they start moving stuff around. So there's always like, this is minimal disturbance, not no disturbance, so that's okay. Also had one of the special little internet police types that come out. You know, there's a police in every niche, and I don't mean actual cops. I mean the people that are self-appointed watchers to tell you everything you're doing wrong. Like, I've seen goldfish police, yes, goldfish police, water filter police, and now, dun dun dun, the compost police came to my last YouTube video on this and said, I don't know what you're doing. It has to be the way Dr. Johnson does it. It has to be 5.5 feet tall, and it has to have a pallet. You don't have a pallet. How are you gonna get any airflow? Calm down, relax. Relax, compost police officer, it's okay. I've been doing this about 5 years now. In fact, I just started doing a smaller version of this back in 2009. If you are an MSB member and you go into the really old annals of the membership area, you'll find a video showing you how to build this before Dr. Johnson did anything like it, except it was on a much smaller scale using a garbage can. And I recommend that more for people who have issues with doing worms. Like, I often have problems with worms because ants go into any worm bin I have and kill them, and they will come in here and kill my worms as well. So if you're like doing a continuous composting, that system works pretty well. It doesn't do what this does. But there's a reason, Mr. Compost Police Officer, there's a reason that I don't have pallets. And I'm building a course on how to do all this. And in that course, I'll say, you might want a pallet. There's a lot of reasons you might want a pallet. But why don't I want a pallet? Well, because I believe in minimalism. Over 5 years of doing this, I have removed things one at a time to see what can I remove to make this easier. What can I do to make this something that's not farming 2,000 acres and doesn't have any heavy equipment, doesn't want to build scaffoldings, doesn't want to climb up 5 feet in the air to dump wood chips into a tower. How can I make this where the average homesteader can do it at homestead scale with, you know, a wheelbarrow and a 10-tine fork and some cheap goat fencing? And this is what I've come up with. He said, your compost is supposed to be like clay. Fool, my compost is like clay. It's some of the most beautiful compost you will ever see. Is it as good as Dr. Johnson's? You know what? I'm going to say, for me, it's better. How's that work? Well, if I have to do it with a 5.5-foot tower built out of, you know, concrete reinforcement with welding together freaking jigs out of rebar and stuff like that, I wouldn't do it at all. So either you can have my version, or you can go through all the effort to do the you know, Johnson Sioux proper version, or you can have no compost, or you can have high turn compost. And so what I've tried to do is bring as much of the benefit of the Johnson Sioux method as possible at a height that's a reasonable working height. So this is 3-foot goat fence. I'm using reusable wire ties. They sell for like $6 a hundred to hold everything together. Now, there are some modifications that are getting made. I do think it might benefit from more airflow underneath. So I'm actually going to add in my next version of this 4 pieces of perforated pipe on the bottom around the main hole to give a little bit more airflow from underneath. But why do I want mine sitting on the ground? Why do I not want a pallet? Is it just to eliminate something if you can? It is not. It's because I have been composting and working this area for 10 years. For the first 5 years we were on this property, we ran a commercial duck farm, which means our ducks, Lulu, leave that duck alone. We got an injured Muscovy in there. Lulu, leave him be. We had about 150 ducks in this area every night. And I brought in 2 truckloads of wood chips a month into this area to keep it from stinking. And that was done for 5 years. I'm standing 5 inches higher than I would have been 10 years ago, just from the buildup in this area. This is like one of the places you can actually dig a hole on my property. What does that mean? That means this ground is exceptionally fertile and it is teeming with microorganisms, which is what this entire method is about. It's not about nitrogen, right? This is not about nitrogen. It is, but there's a long way around to get there. It's not about potassium and it's not about phosphorus, okay? It's about microorganisms. By having ground contact, what I'm doing here is kind of a sloppy, large-scale version of IMO, or Indigenous Microorganism Collection. By having that ground contact, I'm getting lots of interaction between that level, that very old now, very well cultivated level, and you can see how things grow in here. It's kind of beautiful how everything grows in here, okay? And I'm getting that into my compost, and that's why I'm doing that. Now, why might you want a pallet? Because you want better airflow, sure. Or what if you're building them out of IBC tote cages? You use their pallet, drill some holes in the metal thing on the bottom, and you have farm level equipment, and you have a forklift. Guess what? You can move your freaking bioreactors around. That would be great. I think that'd be a great reason to do it. Look, I'm not taking away from anything Dr. Johnson is done here. I think if you have all the equipment and all the time and all the material and you want to do it the way he does it, great. But if you want ease, i.e. I clean that out and I take the material out of our continuous compost pit and you put it in here and then you do this and then you don't do shit for a year except water it, I'm going to say the compost I make is pretty amazing. I don't know, maybe next video I'll dig some out of that finished pile over there and show you what it looks like.